So, hi, I'm really excited to be here with Megan Sumrell today and learn all about how we can keep our lives in balance and get stuff done and stop procrastinating, which I know is a huge topic. We have got so much to talk about. But before we get stuck into that, Megan, could you just share with us a little bit about how you became a time management expert?
Absolutely. It's so funny. I always love hearing people's stories into entrepreneurship because it's always bizarre, right? It's not like we woke up one day and said, and now I'm going to go do this. So my background actually is in the software IT space. So I was a math major and jumped into the computer space pretty early on and spent over 20 years there. And part of my role during that time was really zeroing in on defining systems and processes for large scale software companies to do things better, faster, cheaper, and really dove into that world of quality when it relates to software, and absolutely loved what I did. And over the course of my career, I took a number of kind of all the traditional productivity, time management courses as well, because that was something I was always really passionate about. And I got married later in life, started a family later. And when my daughter was born, at this point, I was like, okay, I've got this time management thing down pat. I know what I'm doing. And then this tiny human came into my life and nothing worked. It's like, I feel like the wheels fell completely off. And I spent the next several years really struggling to figure out how to juggle this career that I loved, but also wanting to have a little bit more time freedom to be the mom that I wanted to be, and family and home and all of that. And when she was about, I guess about 3 years old, I remember one night of just, we had gone to the park that day and I was pushing her on the swings and talking to the woman next to me. And she paused and said, well, what do you do for fun? And I had this long pause and I realized I didn't have an answer anymore. And I went home that night, and after putting our daughter to bed, I just remember collapsing into tears and thinking, like, what's happened? I didn't, it's such a slow progression, but you wake up one day and I realized every minute of my day was just meant serving others, following a task list, doing things that were put in front of me. And I thought, here I am with what I thought I wanted, and I'm miserable. And what am I going to do about this? And so the irony of it all is, my job at this point was actually going into organizations and looking at the big picture and helping them do things and restructure it. The thought had never occurred to me to do it, in my own life. So that's when I got serious about really taking a step back and saying, I need to find a better way to juggle all the roles that I play in my life. And so I completely scrapped my entire way of managing my calendar, my task list, and everything, and started building a whole new process from the ground up. And my friends and family started noticing a real shift in me. And so people reached out and started asking, what are you doing? You seem so much happier. You seem so much more calm, less overwhelmed. And I slowly started being invited into a lot of working mom organizations in the area and started teaching courses around this just because it was something I was passionate about. And lo and behold, woke up one morning and said, this is it. This is my calling. And I made the leap of faith and left corporate and have now turned this into my full-time passion.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's so true, isn't it? I mean, it's easy enough to have all the tools and the theory and the systems and know how it should work. But as you say, as soon as you have kids, that all goes out the window. It doesn't work like that. And they're so unpredictable. And every stage of life is different. Just as you manage this, okay, I've got this schedule, I know how it works. Then they go to the next developmental stage and you have to start all over again from scratch. So like now my kids have just gone to a big school, but here that just means the most erratic timetable ever. And my 10-year-old comes home for lunch for 4 hours once a week.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I mean, how do you juggle things around that? But I'm so pleased that through hard work and trial and error and a very close burnout, close to having a burnout, I've discovered the tools that work for me and how to manage that. And I'm always getting people ask, like, how do you do it all? I was like, well, I don't. From the outside, it always looks to other people that you have everything perfect and it's all organized, but the reality can be something quite different. So what do
Yeah,
you
and what you just said about the whole people asking, how do you do it all? I get that all the time. I'm like, Megan, how do you, because I have 3 businesses plus, home and family and all that. My response to them is always, you don't see all the things I'm not doing.
yeah.
And I think that, like, for me, that is one of the biggest things that you have to learn how to do is what are you willing to let go of
Mm.
so that you can do the things that are really important to you. And so that's something I always love to be very honest about, is sharing, like, here's everything I didn't do this week, because you
Yeah.
only see the things I did instead of all the things I didn't.
We should start a movement. This
Yes.
is what I didn't do. um, yeah, and I think it's, as you say, it's about sacrifice. But what I learned a few years ago, so I can't remember who told me this, but it really changed things for me, is that sacrifice isn't giving up something for something else. It's giving up something for something better. And I was like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, that there are always choices to be made. But if you if I get a cleaner or I don't do the washing, the laundry during the week, it leaves me room for things that are much better. And then it also leaves room for my husband and kids to help out at the weekend. It becomes
Absolutely.
a family activity. So there are lots of things that I stopped doing or sacrificed or started to do differently in order to have something better. And having that simple framework was really helpful as well, just to think, okay, am I switching this out for something better, something that's building for the future, something that I'm really proud of or happy to do, or is this something I'm going to regret? And that makes it just much easier to make the right decisions as well, and put things into context quite quickly. But I'm really eager to learn, what do you feel is so different about the way that you do time management and productivity as a mom and a business owner, busy business owner, than what you learned and used in the corporate world?
So great question. And for me, there's 2 key things, because a lot of people before they jump into one of my free boot camps or something, they're like, I've done all this before. What's going to be different here? And there's kind of 2 things with my approach to this that is very different from most of the productivity and time management training out there. And for me, the first is acknowledging, particularly for entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurs with young children or children of any age, really, that the concept of that so many people teach, and I do too, around time blocking, where the idea is, let's find all the, similar activities you can, set forth and go focus on your thing for 4 or 5 hours and get that done. The reality of being able to have 4 or 5 hours of uninterrupted focused time is, few and far between. And so when you look at time blocking and prioritization, when you are looking at a more of a corporate traditional setting where you walk into your office and you're there for 8 or 9 hours, prioritizing within that tiny bubble and managing your blocks of time during the day just in that setting is really, really easy. When you take a step out of there, and now it's not just managing your day and priorities, but it's juggling all the hats that you wear, because you've got responsibilities and tasks and obligations around being a parent, around being a business owner, particularly if you're a solopreneur. There's a lot. Now we're playing the marketing, the sales, all the stuff that comes with it there, plus family. And then somewhere in there, you've got to prioritize yourself as well. And so I take an approach of really acknowledging, we start from, what are all the roles that you play? And from there, let's look at strategic ways to minimize what I call context switching, where you're going, now I'm mom, now I'm working, now I'm a caregiver, now I'm back on the phone for school, now I'm trying to help this customer over here. So it's coming at it from a very pragmatic, honest view of, this is the reality of what's on our plate. So instead of trying to pretend that we can go live this dream world of 8 uninterrupted hours, let's address the fact that we can't, and then come up with some strategic ways to do that. And the other key difference for me as well, I love goal setting. I have a whole workshop around that. I love, starting with the vision and creating these goals and breaking them down into an action plan. But rather than starting from there, I prefer to start from, let's look at how we're running our days and weeks. Because if we don't get the right systems and processes in place from the ground up, that creates some space, that creates some structure, that creates some predictability. All that time that we spend creating these incredible goals and plans don't ever get implemented because we haven't addressed the fundamental problem of where am I going to find the time to actually work on this. So I like to start down there in the weeds and really clean up the daily and weekly and monthly planning approaches so that now we have a framework that we can now go forth and do all those amazing things that we want to do.
I love that. It's so true. That's where I always start, is with my time budget. So where can I fit things in realistically, and then building out from there. So you kind of have the two dimensions and bring them together, and it just makes all the difference. Otherwise you have this pie in the sky idea of, yeah, I'm going to do all of these amazing things, and it never gets done, and then you just feel like such a failure.
You feel like a failure. Yeah.
And that's not what we are at all. So don't want to go there, but put in these amazing systems first. And when you have that structure, then you can make sure you do have time for yourself and the fun elements too, which is so important. And that's I've told the story a lot on the podcast about in my first business, where I didn't have that at all. I was so focused on my family and on my kids, my clients. I was just working around the clock, and yet no time for myself. And then that led to, like, very closely to my burnout, which I narrowly avoided, which is great. And thankfully I started to learn some of these skills, and I wish I'd met you right then, because it would have been so much quicker, rather than having to spend years figuring this stuff out. And I'm feeling guilty as well. So as mums, we have this tendency to just feel guilty for all the things we're not doing, and comparing to others and say, oh my gosh, she's done all these fresh cookies for school, and I just bought the crisps. How do you have any advice for anyone out there who's feeling that way, feeling I can't possibly let go of this stuff because I have a sense of duty, or this pressure that we sometimes put on ourselves that we needn't do?
Yeah, so one of the things that I implement in part of my planning process, everything I teach starts from this core skill of learning how to create what I call weekly planning. Like if you're going from a day-to-day planning perspective, you are always going to feel overwhelmed. So I start everything at coaching the importance of creating a weekly plan. Well, part of my weekly planning process at the end of every week is, before you start looking at your next week and what you're going to do, is taking a few minutes and writing down what I like to call a weekly success tracker, where you just go back over the week and write down absolutely every single thing that you did. Because women, we're so hard on ourselves. Let's say I had made a to-do list of 100 things that I was going to get done that week, and I got 98 of them done. What do most people do at the end of the week? They sit there and go, oh, I didn't get those 2 things done. And they're zeroed in on the 2 that they didn't get done, and they feel like a failure, and they're beating themselves up, instead of saying, holy smokes, I had 98 things done this week. This is amazing. And so I really love to take that time at the end of every week to sit back and reflect on, here's everything that I did. Because when you set foot into planning your next week from a place of celebrating all of the things that you did last week, instead of feeling this, dread or sense of failure of, oh, I didn't get those things done, we're acknowledging, holy, like, man, I got a lot done, and I'm going to celebrate that, so that if there's those 2 things that didn't, no big deal. I'm going to bring them forward into this week. And the other thing that is so important when you're looking at your list of things that you've laid out that you feel you need to get done, I always ask myself, is this something I need to do, I want to do, or I'm feeling I should do? And I think we let ourselves get shoulded way too many times, like you said, because we see what someone else does, thinking, oh man, I should do that. We don't know the backstory of that. Maybe those cookies that she made, that's her business. She loves making cookies. She sells them, like this is her passion. And she was so excited to go do that. And I'm over here feeling guilty because I should have. when the reality is that probably wasn't the best use of my time. So to really take some time and review everything that you're putting on your list or your calendar and asking yourself, is this a should, or does this really belong here?
Yeah, I love that concept. And yeah, so often if we go back through our shoulds or coulds or woulds, it's all the things that we don't have control over anyway. And it's all just there to add pressure to ourselves. And we just are our own worst enemy sometimes. And just if we can put those aside. And I love your little checklist of deciding like which activities are really worth our time, which is so important. And I'm always asking myself as well, like, how could this be simpler? And it's amazing how many times I'll go for a walk and I'll just think about something like, how can I make this simpler? It just feels that little bit too heavy, that little bit overwhelming. And then I just come out with something that's like, oh, I just need to do this. And it's incredible how often you can turn things around and just make life simpler. And I remember speaking with a female entrepreneur, Giselle, and she started the first Swiss watch company for women, and she employs women who work from home. It's just the most incredible company, really inspiring. But she started her business at a time when women weren't in the watch industry. They didn't start businesses, and she was in Switzerland, which was behind the times anyway, in that respect. And I asked her, how did you find time to do everything at a time where women were kind of expected to do the works? And she said, well, I married well, and I buy clothes that don't need ironing. So in other words, ask for help, make sure that you make those right choices, and don't make things complicated. Just buy non-iron tops instead of things that need ironing or whatever. And I thought that was just such great advice. Just, again, keep it simple.
And I think so many times we don't keep it simple, not because we don't want to, but we are going so fast, so hard all day long that we never have those moments where we're out on a walk and those moments of clarity come to us, because we are kind of, I guess, trying to moving so fast that if you're constantly putting out things, you are go, 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 do, do, do. And you're in that frame of mind where you're just in the, I'm getting it done, I'm checking it off. And you don't have any space for yourself to let anything come in. That's when you get into those states of feeling helpless and overwhelmed and exhausted, because you're just going from one thing to the next to the next. And if you never have that moment and that space and that quiet for yourself, where now your brain can quiet and be open to those aha moments that we all so desperately need. I know for me, I can tell very quickly when I'm in that state, all of a sudden things start getting really hard. I'm thinking, why is this so hard? And I always go back and can realize, what, a couple of days have gone by and I have not given myself that space to be quiet and let those thoughts come to me.
Yeah, great advice. And I know I was reading a book by Dr. Nick Hall a few years ago now, but he made the point that, there's no such thing as too much stress. In fact, stress can be quite good for us because it's under the pressure of a deadline. We get our best things done. We get quite creative. He said, but the problem comes in when there's not enough counter stress. When we don't allow that time for ourselves to recover, to, as you say, to have that creative space, to have time off, do something completely different. So we always have to think that, the stress isn't the bad thing. It's a part of not having the time off to recover is the challenge. So do you have any tips for how to make that switch from, okay, I'm go all day, I've been cooking for the kids, I've been doing my networking, doing all my work, then you get this time off, but how do you switch your brain off from that? Do you have any tips? Because it's not so easy. I'm going to switch off now, but I don't really half the time.
Don't, because the wheels are going. And again, all of this to me really comes back to that foundational work of having your weekly plan in place. And it needs to be it can't be in your head. It has to be somewhere where you can visually see it. I really geek out on brain science and how our brains work and help us with productivity. And it is proven that our brains work 10 times harder when it's trying to process the information in our head than when we can just visually see it. So for me, when I go through my process of weekly planning, first thing that's going on my calendar are what I call the non-negotiables, or the things that are imposed upon me, the stuff that has to happen at a specific time. Maybe you have a meeting, you have an appointment, you need to get your kids to school or an activity. Those things go in there first. Then the next thing that goes in there, and this is where most people, they kind of go, wait, what goes in there next? The next thing that goes in there is me blocking off large chunks of time where I am saying, I'm not working, I'm not accepting any additional tasks, I'm unavailable. And those are the hours of time, such as like right after school, when I pick up my daughter and we come home, I know for the next 2 hours, could I try and squeeze stuff in? Sure. But that's when productivity tanks, and that's when nobody's getting the best of you, when you're answering the emails while trying to help with homework, while trying to do some dinner prep. So then the second thing that goes on my calendar is me blocking off those chunks of time where I am acknowledging I'm not able to get stuff done here. And just by putting those two things in first, you get a pretty powerful visual, at least I do, of just how little time I truly have available to work on my business, to do some other things on my task list that are important to me. But when you set forth into your week with that understanding, it allows you to stop putting ridiculous expectations on yourself of all the things that you're going to get done. I know when I went through my planning yesterday and I added it up, I only have 11 hours this week to spread across all 3 of my businesses. That is not a lot of time, but it's forcing me to make really good prioritization decisions. And then because I've put that time on my calendar of when I'm not working, and therefore I'm not overcommitting, that's what allows me, when it's suddenly, 8 o'clock at night and put the daughter to bed and it's time to relax, I can, because I've proactively, intentionally put that into my plan for the week. And so I'm not putting unrealistic expectations that is going to keep my brain churning and going, oh, I should be doing this, I should be. No, I shouldn't. I actually made a very intentional plan this week that I'm not doing that. But here are the few things in those 10 or 11 hours that I have this week that I'm going to do, and I know when I'm going to do them. So when you have that purposeful plan to your week, it actually helps you shut down.
Great advice. And I love that about being intentional, having a plan, setting clear boundaries, and then sticking with them.
Yes, we are our own worst enemies with that, right? We're always the ones going, oh no, I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do this. It's like, no, I'm not. I said I wasn't, and I'm not going to.
And it takes a bit of discipline to get into that, but then the habit, and then you realize, oh, I can actually work this way and get stuff done. And I know when I'm like really focused and I have all my priorities mapped out, then I can see, as you say, how little time you've got to dedicate to something. So it's much easier to be focused and make the most of it. I think those days where maybe it's my husband has decided he's taking the day, so I have a whole day to work instead of my usual like 3 hours and a few pockets of space here and there, then I don't get any more work done. I'd like to say, yeah, I get loads done, but I don't, because then I don't have that same pressure and focus, and I do tend to drift and look out the window and like say, oh, what does that celebrity look like today? And go down that rabbit warren. And so it's having that plan is so essential.
It is. And the other thing that people uncover, it's so powerful. I remember before I got really intentional about my non-working time, that window from like 3 to 6:30, from when I brought my daughter home from school and it was homework, activities, cooking dinner, all of that stuff. I used to try and kind of what I called sneak in work. Like I'd have my phone there and, okay, well, while she's, turn my back over here and just quickly respond to this text or quickly answer this email. That 3.5 hour window was the most stressful, frustrating 3.5 hours of my day. And it was for my daughter. It was for my husband, because he could hear, because he works from home as well. So he could hear some of the, frustrations we were having. And it's like, by the time the dinner hour was over, I was exhausted. And so when I stopped doing that and just said, I'm unavailable, and instead from about 6:30 to 7 every night while she's taking a bath and all of that, I come sit down at my desk, takes about 20 minutes, and review any emails or things that have come in that 3.5 hour window. I can get caught up in 20 minutes what I was churning over for 3.5 hours of stress every single day, because I wasn't fully engaged in either role that I was in. And so when people learn how to truly step away and be fully present in whatever the other thing is, you will find when you come back and then, pick back up where you left off, what you thought was hours of work is oftentimes 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly with email and text popping up all the time, we have this instinct, oh, I have to answer that, but you really don't. And when you leave the time, you can be a bit more strategic as well. So, okay, well, what messages do I want to, am I waiting for? Let's do those first. Because your inbox, Brendan Pashad always says it, your email inbox is everyone else's agenda for you. It's not your agenda, it's what everyone else wants of you. So you have to put your priorities first and plan before you go in there to think, like, what am I looking for? Who do I want to hear from? Who do I want to reply to? And just do that and get out of there. And then when you have the time, go back and see, okay, do I have time to help other people? And I think as women, we kind of have this feeling that we have to be there for everybody and helping everyone, and we tend to put ourselves last. And I think that's one big lesson I had from having the kids, was learning that I couldn't do that anymore. No. I had to prioritize what I needed to get done, my family, and then use the time I had left over for helping people if I could. And those that didn't understand that just really didn't really deserve my help anyway, and just come to that realization that there's most people who are there for you get that completely. And it was huge, that just saved me so much guilt and pressure. I mean, we have so many sources of that we need to really sort of get a bit strict with ourselves. And
we do, because we always default is we'll take the leftovers, instead of being up there claiming the time up front. And it's hard for people to learn if they haven't been doing it. But the beautiful thing is, once you do it long enough, then it becomes a habit. And so now if someone were to say, hey, Megan, what do you do for fun? I have a whole slew of answers I could tell them, instead of being that person I was 7 years ago that said, I can't even think of anything I do for fun anymore, because I had nothing for me. I'd given it all away.
Yeah. And one thing that I had a similar moment where a friend was training to be a coach, so I volunteered to have a session with her. And that was my moment where she was doing this kind of wheel and finding out where I was balanced and where I wasn't. And they were just like, me time was at 0. And she's like, okay, this is a very wonky wheel. We need to do something about that. And it was everything I could do not to burst out in tears right there and then, because as soon as seeing it there, I could feel it. I was exhausted and didn't have that me time. And then when we started to think about, well, how can you get that me time? What would you like to be doing? I was like, just if I could go to a yoga class or a Pilates once a week, that'd be amazing. Great. Right. Well, what do you need to do make that happen? It's like, well, I'd need my husband to come home before 8 o'clock at night, or whenever he comes home. And it's like, well, what does that take? It's like, well, I'd have to ask him. So I went and I asked him, and he's like, sure, happy to come home once a week early so you can get to your class. But it had never occurred to me to ask, and as soon as I learned that lesson to start asking people for help that I needed, or just saying it, things like, it was, I can't do that and this is why, it was amazing how many people were so happy to come, and I've been waiting to help you with this, but they don't want to jump in because they're frightened they'll insult you in some way, or but as soon as you ask, you have all the support available. Well, that was a huge lesson for me.
Yeah, it is. And the more we want to help others, yet we we deprive people the opportunity to help us because we don't want to be the ones that ask for help. Yet we're over here going, somebody asked me for help, I want to help you. It's the most bizarre, mixed up way our brains are. But every time I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to ask for help, I always ask myself, wouldn't I be devastated to hear that she didn't ask me for help when I could have? And that always reminds me, Megan, just ask for help when you need it. Ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. And women are community beings. And that's where we really thrive, is when we can pool our resources and help each other out and share our experiences, and that's where we can really come into our own. But we just have to ask, and then we give other people permission to ask too, you know, and we're all that little bit more open. I think over time our society became a little bit closed, and we lost that aspect a little bit and felt we had to do everything, but we really don't.
Absolutely. Yep.
Megan, you have shared so much incredible value and inspiration and everything. Is there anything else, any final words you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Oh, so many. I always tell everyone, like, I'm one of those people that has to learn everything the hard way. Like, I wish I could create a movie of all the ways I used to do things and just say, just don't do this. But no, the biggest thing that I would encourage everyone, particularly, you know, for entrepreneurs out there that are listening, first is understand that it is okay to say no. It is okay to not get everything done that you thought maybe you should. And that the best way to really release yourself from the ridiculous, unrealistic expectations that you likely have put on yourself really does come down to understanding how many hours in the day do you honestly have. And from that, use that to help you set your real priorities. The two phrases I use often in all of my programs, one is structure creates freedom, which I think most people are so afraid to put everything down on a calendar and create that schedule because they think it's very limiting. But when you learn how to do it the right way, structure actually does really create freedom. I promise you that it does. And the second thing is, being busy does not make you productive. And so understanding that as well, and realizing you might be better off doing one thing really well than 10 things kind of sort of halfway, maybe, if you're lucky. So those would be the two big things I would tell everyone.
Oh, and they are huge things. Thank you so much. And yeah, I agree about that. Structure creates freedom. I remember when I went to my very first Toastmasters meeting. I don't know if you've ever been. It's a public speaking club, and you arrive and you have this agenda, and everything is like, this 5 minutes, this is going to happen, and then 3 minutes later, you know, everything is listed to the minute, and you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I just stepped into? But
it works.
It works because it's so organized. Everyone knows exactly what's happening and when. Everyone can just relax and enjoy the evening. You know, you don't have to think about or worry about anything or what's happening next. It's all there. And it's just, that was a huge realization for me as well. I was like, wow, because it's so organized and well planned, then everyone can just relax and enjoy the time and make the most of the time we have together. And the meetings work so well, and it ends on time, and everyone really appreciates that. So that's just a simple example of the first time I saw that structure in place, and just how much it really does create that freedom. Yes. And to do the same for ourselves is really just so powerful. It was a bit of courage and discipline at first. I know whenever I started doing my planning, I kind of felt I was, you know, I had this image of myself kicking and screaming, come on. And it took a while of trying it out and seeing what structure really did work for me, because sometimes you think, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to do, and it's a little bit sort of dreamlike. And then you kind of test it against reality and then tweak it along the way. But once you have that process, it's just so freeing.
It is. I have a dear friend I've been working with on this because she's resisted it for so long. She's like, I want to be a free spirit. If feel like going to the, the zoo on Tuesday. I want to go to the zoo on Tuesday. And so finally I said, well, let me ask you this. When was the last time you just picked up and grabbed the family and, did something on a whim? She's like, just the other day. And I said, did you enjoy it? There was this long pause, and she's like, no, the whole time I was there, I was stressed out about everything else that wasn't getting done. And I said, that's what I'm getting at. If you've got the right amount of structure in place, that's what gives you the freedom to go do those things and be fully present and enjoy it, because your brain is not up here thinking about and trying to figure out how the other stuff is going to get done when you've got the right structure for you in place to manage that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Megan. You've given
Thank
everyone
you.
so much food for thought, but even more than that, some great plans that they can, and tips that they can go away and start implementing, which is fantastic. So I believe you have a boot camp that people can do to help them
So I run a boot camp about every 6 to 8 weeks. The next one is starting in October. And so you can go ahead and get on the wait list right now. It's a totally free boot camp. It runs for 5 days. You can sign up at megansumrell.com/top boot camp. TOP stands for Time Management, Organization, and Productivity. And so during that 5-day boot camp, I walk you through what I call the productivity pyramid, a lot of what we talked about here today, but it really shows how to take the 3 sides of that pyramid, which is your task list, your schedule, and then that structure part, to help you get kind of up and running on this concept of minimizing unrealistic expectations and starting to get that weekly plan process in place.
Amazing. I think we're all going to see you in there. It sounds fantastic.
Wonderful.
And I'll pop the links to that underneath, as well as your other details, so people can get in touch if they want to know more about your and how you can help them. Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Have a very productive week.
Thank you. You too.
And thanks again for sharing all your great advice.
My pleasure.
Bye.